Hey guys, Tony Maritato here. So I think it's so interesting how things change with time, how perspective changes with time. I'm going to talk about Medicare beneficiaries. I'm going to talk about cash-based services and a hybrid practice model. But let me just take a step back and kind of create some context. So I became a physical therapist, kind of out of the world of being a strength coach, strength and conditioning. I love biomechanics. My bachelor's degree was in kinesiology. So everything was, very logical, very science-based. Like 2 + 2 always equal 4. There was no question about it. If somebody came in and they were overweight, super simple. You move more, you eat less. It was a clear-cut scenario, right? If I could get you to exercise and burn an extra 250 calories a day, and I could get you to consume 250 calories a day less, we would create a 500 calorie a day deficit, 7 days a week, 3,500 calories a week, you'd lose a pound of fat. Piece of cake. How did it work? Horribly. Did it work for anybody? Barely. The ones that it did work, it wasn't sustainable. Like, it was just a horrible model. But that's because I was trying to apply like a mechanical science, thermo whatever, to humans. And humans are not machines. Humans are not robots. Humans are not perfect systems. They mess everything up. And so just like my approach to patient care has dramatically changed over the years, I got introduced to pain science and understanding that pain isn't always associated with tissue damage. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. There's so many factors, how sleep and fear and all these other things can influence the pain perception, the pain response. So too have my views changed around Medicare reimbursement, third-party payers. I think this is a great opportunity for us now. We're kind of shut in. The clinic is closed. We're barely treating, a fraction of the caseload. But it gives us time to kind of reset. It gives us time to stop, take a breath, appreciate where we've come, appreciate what we've done, and look at things from a different perspective. And that's what I want to bring here today. I want you to kind of join me through this journey as I look at where I was, where we were professionally, and where we are heading. So you and I, most likely, anybody who's been a clinician more than a handful of years, I spent almost 2 decades trying to make everything medically necessary, trying to make everything a covered service. Everything should be justified. Why? Because I felt that everything was a skilled service. I felt that, what I was doing in the clinic every single day required the skills of a therapist. And while a lot of it does, I would probably say now, better understanding the guidelines than I did a decade ago, a lot of it doesn't. And even if I try to force the issue, even if I try to say, look, this Medicare beneficiary, and we're going to talk Medicare because that's the topic today, this Medicare beneficiary requires the skills of a therapist. The question is, does everything you're doing require the skill of a therapist? Can some of what you're doing be offloaded to somebody else? How do I establish those guidelines? How do I understand, what I can allow an assistant to do, what I can allow a personal trainer, an LMT to do? And there's different components. Now, absolutely, you have to understand the CMS guidelines. You have to understand their published literature. I often reference CMS Chapter 15, CMS Chapter 30. I talk about the documentation in Section 50 around utilization of an ABN, an Advanced Beneficiary Notice. I talk about going into Section 220 to understand what their definition of medical necessity is, and look at the specific examples. I think once you get into the examples, all of a sudden the lights turn on and the rats will scatter, and you'll start to really kind of understand. But even aside from all of that, I want to look at this from a big picture perspective. Like I said, we know the Medicare system is not flush with cash. We know that as the baby boomer generation becomes Medicare beneficiaries, as the number of individuals requiring, benefits and utilization grows and the number of individuals paying into the system declines, there's going to be a tipping point. And so maybe we need to stop for a second, reassess, and look at what is actually the intention of the Medicare benefit, what should be paid for by Medicare, and then what gives us the opportunity to have a win-win, to improve the quality of the outcome and to allow the Medicare system to be more sustainable. So you've heard me provide tons of research and documentation and everything on what's a covered service, what's not a covered service. If you haven't heard that, ask me and I'm happy to go through it again. But I think the bigger issue here is this opens the door for us to really do what we do best, for us to provide the highest level of service possible. Now, does everybody want the highest level of service possible? Absolutely not. When I go to the grocery store, I have an option. I can buy something labeled organic and pay 2.5 times the price, or I can buy something not labeled organic and pay less, right? It's my choice. I would say something similar happens when you go to buy a car. Physical therapy and car, those two terms are very general, right? A car can be a BMW, or a car can be a Honda, or a car could, back in the day, be a Yugo. I'm going to pay very different price points for very different experiences in driving. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech. Certainly there's a standard of care. There's a minimum viable product. The patient can't get hurt. The patient has certain basic competencies they expect from their clinician, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to have the lowest standard deviation. That means that individuals have the opportunity to buy up. So if you're providing specific, let's say, manual therapy skills that are highly individualized, highly technical, require your skills as a professional, but perhaps Medicare says, we're not going to pay for that, you have the opportunity to charge a self-pay rate. And I think this is really important. Like the example I gave to an individual today was, I said, look, to me, food is probably the most important component in a recovery process, whether it's an orthopedic injury, post-surgical, neuro, whatever. People need to eat better, right? Food is not a covered service. Food is never going to be paid for by your insurance policy. Yet, if I can improve the quality of what's going into the patient's mouth, I can probably improve the quality of the outcome. I can justify they're going to perform better. They're going to do their exercises better. They're going to be more cognitively alert. Their tissue is going to heal better. There's so many benefits to better quality nutrition, yet it's not a covered service under the Medicare benefit. Does that mean that I can never discuss quality of food and intake and all of that stuff? No. I can have a nutritional component to my plan of care. It would be a self-pay component. It's not a covered service. It would be paid for by the beneficiary. That makes sense to most clinicians, and I'm glad it does. Now we just have to take that and kind of move the needle a little bit, and we say, okay, so if that's covered, and we know that right now Medicare is not covering dry needling, it's not covering cupping and other modalities and interventions like that. What about something like this? What about the scenario for the individual who, let's say, just underwent a rotator cuff repair? We know they're going to be out of commission. They're in a sling for, let's say, 6 weeks, passive range of motion only. Does that mean they would not receive benefit from general conditioning to the rest of their entire body, their legs and their other arm and all the other stuff? Of course they would. Is that a covered service? I would say no. Maybe teaching a conditioning program in a one-time session would be covered because we can justify how that's going to improve the healing quality and everything of the involved upper extremity. But I would say to take a person through a conditioning program, set them up on a bike and all these other things, not covered, 100% beneficial to the outcome and to the individual. There are so many opportunities here that those of you who are looking at Medicare, looking at self-pay, trying to understand like how all these pieces come together, I'm the first one to say there isn't a roadmap. There isn't a simple solution. You know, everybody, we're clinicians, we love black and white. We want it to be right and wrong. We want it to be this or that. It's not. You have to use your professional judgment, come up with guidelines based on established CMS criteria for what's covered and what's not, and then present a case within your documentation to say, this manual intervention is not a covered service for these reasons, but it's absolutely beneficial to the beneficiary and will be paid for out of pocket. Whereas this intervention is a covered service based on standards of care or Medicare guidelines and will be included in the, both are included in the plan of care, but this is reimbursed by Medicare as a covered service and this is not. These are the challenges that you have to face head on. But if you do it right, you'll never have insurance dictating your plan of care. You'll never run into an issue around denials or can I do this? Can I not do this? You take full control over what you bring to the table when we're talking about the patient care, patient plan of care, the outcome, the benefits. And now you can provide the level of service that you want to provide, that you went to school for, that you became the clinician that you are today. Now you can do it with no holds barred because you're not sitting there anymore at the discretion of the payer. Because you're saying, look, I know you're not going to pay for this and that's okay. The patient can pay for this. The patient's family can pay for this. Other, you know, there's always a means if there is interest to achieve the goals that you are establishing. Now the question always comes up, how do you sell that to the patient? You just do, you just communicate. You say, hey, Mrs. Jones, we completed your evaluation. Of course, your evaluation is fully covered by Medicare and your supplemental plan. Now, based on that evaluation, based on the findings, this is my recommendation to you. Medicare will cover these services, and those are a huge component to getting you back to where you want to be. Medicare doesn't pay for these services, but I believe these services are beneficial. These are important. I think you need to eat better. I think you need to sleep better. I think you would appreciate and feel good and probably do your exercises better after a massage session. All of these things are not covered services. This is the price for this column. This column is covered by Medicare. If you want the optimal outcome as quickly as possible and the longest term benefit, I recommend the entire program. If you just absolutely do not want these supplemental services, then you can do the Medicare covered services. I'm going to give you a list of clinicians that's what they do. That's all that they do. Unfortunately, I don't do that. Any of the clients that I work with, they perform my entire plan of care. And so the choice is always yours. I would love to work with you, but I understand there's a cost associated with that. So if you want to just try the Medicare covered services, go talk to John, to Tom, to Dana. If you want to try this program, we can get started tomorrow. You know, and I mean, it has to be at the outset. It has to be right from day one that you explain that not everything is covered. And I can't imagine you're going to find a person who thinks everything should be covered in this day and age. Guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope this kind of exploration of new ideas and just my goal isn't to change your mind. My goal is to show you a different perspective. And if that perspective makes sense, I want you then to ask me questions and let's develop the conversation. And then, of course, if you want to enroll in my Medicare course, you're more than welcome to. The real value in enrolling in the course, besides the basic content you learn, is having the people around you who are doing what you want to do and doing it successfully. So guys, I'm going to wrap up this video. If you have questions, post them in the comments. If you want to reach out to me, obviously I'm always available on Messenger or email or whatever. But don't hesitate. Let's keep this conversation moving forward. I'll catch you on the next video.